Sonic T. Hedgehog, one of the most iconic faces in all of the gamings, for better or for worse. While if any of his games are actually any good is heavily debated amongst peoples, he is generally considered to be a pretty cool character among all else. I mean, he was specifically designed for that exact purpose, that purpose being cool, but I'll get to that. Over the years, the public opinion on Sonic has definitely improved, however, don't get me wrong, there was a time where every single game was met with nothing but laughter. The poor guy was being lampooned all over. But did he deserve it? Regardless, as much as people argue on if any of the modern games are any good or not, the 2D platformers that released on the Genesis are still looked back on as some pretty good games by today's standards. Or at least I'd assume so, because I've yet to play this game. I really hope this is good. The 80s were tough on everybody who wasn't Nintendo. After Nintendo rode saving the video game market from its crash into the huge success of the NES, not a lot of people could compete with Nintendo. Meet Sega. Sega were in the business of wanting to be a profitable company. Who wouldn't? The issue is that their first console sucked and the Genesis was looking like it was about to suck too. So what was a Sega to do? What they needed was a mascot. One that could be as recognizable as Mario was for Nintendo. And for some reason, Alex the Kid wasn't cutting it. I don't know why. So in 1990, they decided to let their employees take a shot at saving the company from mediocrity. So an in-house character designing competition was held, with such stunning entries as what, who, and why. But eventually they would settle on the character of Needlemouse, who was eventually renamed to Sonic the Hedgehog, because Needlemouse is a stupid name. Now Sega also knew that this mascot needed to appeal to the masses, specifically the Western masses, more specifically the States, as video games were just as big a market there as they were in Japan. So many Japanese games never reached the States because they just didn't appeal to us. So Sega had to solve that issue. The way the Japanese viewed Americans back then is nothing short of badass. Like, by God, I wish we were treating ourselves as coolly as the animes did. So the reasonable next step was to make Sonic stand for all of the ideals that they assumed Americans stood for as well. They gave him a cool, constantly angry face, they gave him a cool box art, they gave him all of the personality of Bill Clinton. I'll get back to you on that. And after a lot of hard work, in 1991, Sonic the Hedgehog was released to the Genesis, and this thing did great. It sold like hotcakes, mainly because it was a pack-in title, but also because it was pretty good. Like, what else were you gonna play on your Genesis? Now, with all that build-up, it's time for me to actually play it myself and see if I like it or not. Now, as much as this game doesn't stack up compared to later 2D Sonic games, it still does a lot of things very well. Now, if you couldn't tell by being on planet Earth for more than a week, Sonic the Hedgehog's gimmick, as a character, is that he can go fast. Is that true in this game? That's to be decided. Now, I will concede, compared to most other games at the time, he's a pretty fast guy. When he wants to be. You see, sometimes he'll be zooming around the level, hell, at the speed of sound. But the second you lose that speed at an annoying area, that's when it gets lame and slow. Later games fix this issue with the spin dash, but that's for later. Funnily enough, despite being advertised as the bluer, faster, more cool version of Mario, Sonic 1's gameplay feels significantly slower than Super Mario Bros. 3, which was released just 3 years earlier. When do these slopes get off? This game has a specific mindset on control that has sort of fallen off in recent years, that being the one-button mindset. The one-button mindset is simple. You can use the left and right D-pad to move however you want, that doesn't really matter, but the one button you're ever gonna press is just any of the face button. They all do the exact same thing. The reason this style fell off is because Balan's Wonderworld came out. Anyways, all of the face buttons do the exact same thing, which is jump. When you jump, you curl up into a ball and are unable to be harmed for the most part. Anything you touch will either be broken or hit in this state. I like the simplicity here. It feels perfectly complicated for a game that needs such precise movement sometimes. Now, what you can hit while jumping around changes a bunch. You can hit little crates to get rings and lives, more on those later, and these crates are scattered all over. You also get put into this form automatically when bouncing off springs and or going through a loop-de-loop. Notice how I said lives. That's right, the live system is here. All fun while playing video games ceases. This game doesn't really let you stay happy with the live system. Save scumming is my friend yet again. Now about those rings, the system for health as well as coins per se is very different from what the contemporaries were doing at the time. Basically when you pick up rings they get added to your counter. duh. But when you get hit by anything at all of your rings bounce out of you, dropping your count to 0. However, once your invincibility frames run out, you can be skilled enough to pick some of them back up. Being hit at 0 rings will make you lose a life though. I like this system because it is decently intuitive to where new players can survive for long, while being skillful enough to where pros can use the rings to plow through any danger if they're skillful enough. My favorite thing about the rings is if you get hit while having enough of them, your Genesis will start smoking and might explode if left unchecked. Now in this game, obstacles are pretty simple to handle, with the enemies usually taking just one hit to handle and nothing more, and most other ways of things killing you don't fare too much better in being annoying. Like pits kill you, but that's too infrequent for you to really care. Invincibility frames and rings can save you from everything else, because this is how video games are designed. However, the Glorbus coding the spikes in this game decided it'd be a really funny idea if the spikes would basically be an instant death to anybody who even pokes one of them, because they ignore invincibility frames. But besides that, I'd say the biggest danger in this game is you going too fast and being punished for it, ironically enough. Something that this game does that carries through most 2D Sonic games going forward are the 2 different endings, depending on if you get all the Chaos Emeralds. In this game, there is 0 reward for doing this besides just not getting the bad ending, except seeing some sort of new sprite where he just points at you. However, the bad ending just shows Eggman taunting you because he's the one with the Chaos Emeralds and you're not. Now you may be wondering how to get the Chaos Emeralds themselves, as they dictate whether or not you get to save the day. So basically, in every level, if you get a certain number of rings or beat the level fast enough, I'm not too sure, my dealer won't tell me where he gets them from, a big yellow ring will show up at the end of the level for you to jump through and enter the bonus stage for a chance to earn yourself a Chaos Emerald. I don't like these. In my playthrough, I didn't get all the emeralds because I'm just not good enough. Sorry not sorry, me want to have something to do this weekend. When it comes to sprite work, this is where the power of the Genesis shines the most. Almost all of the environments are beautifully sprited and the work on enemy and character animations are extremely charming. This game is brimming with life and charm all over in its art, and I feel that to be what really put Sonic on the map. My main complaint though is the background of Green Hill Zone. I don't know how it happened, but I'll assume that someone at SEGA made a really good background for this level. They realized that it didn't fit the background, so someone did the shoddiest job imaginable at scaling the sprite to fit the background, resulting in mixels, which are hard to explain. All I'll say is that you know them when you see them, and I'm seeing them. The reason that said game looks as good as it does is because the Genesis was a 32-bit system, with the NES being an 8-bit console and the SNES being a 16-bit console, with both of these being competitors to SEGA. All this means is that Sonic gets the big sprites and Mario gets the small sprites. Now, since Sonic as a character was the main selling point of the game besides the gameplay itself, it's important to look at the character designs of these games and see how they stack up too. Sonic the Hedgehog in promotional material looks pretty cool. Comparatively, he looks cooler in Japan than here, but that's semantics. In game, his sprites are pretty good, giving him some personality. The issue is whenever you can't see his smile, he just looks really angry, like he wants to kill you, which is no good. And also, I don't think this is just me, but the white pixels under his eyes just make him look like he's on the verge of tears at all times. Eggman, or Dr. Robotnik, is the only other notable character of this game. He is the evil scientist putting animals into robots. I don't think you need to think too hard about what his role in the game is. I will say his sprites at least convey a lot more personality than Sonic's do most of the time, making him quite the cool character. And speaking of Eggman, let's talk about bosses. Each zone has a boss at the end of the 3rd act, and the final zone is just there for the final battle. These bosses deviated a lot from most other bosses at the time, however, where you can just hit them whenever you wanted instead of having to wait from whenever they were most vulnerable. This is genuinely one of the best things this game does in terms of originality, in my opinion. It's just really good for both new players and more experienced ones. But in order to talk about each boss, I figured it'd be better to talk about each of them with their respective zones. So here's my opinion on each of the zones and their bosses in order. Green Hill is a classic. Everyone loves Green Hill. The level may leave a bit to be desired in terms of challenge, but at least it isn't a slog. The boss here is also very simple, but that figures with how simple the first stage of a game should be. Everything in Green Hill is brimming with life and whimsy and is the best introduction a game like Sonic the Hedgehog could ask for. Marble Zone goes against the whole idea of the game and is extremely slow. The platforming is tight and the segments are slow. Everything here blows. I don't like the lava, I don't like the spikes, and I don't like the stupid bats. The boss here is at least sort of cool with the lighting the grass on fire gimmick, but it's just whatever. Spring Yard Zone has some fun parts with the bouncy pins that will go on to be staples of the series, but the environment is just very brown and sad. And the platforming here, as tight as it is, isn't improving the mood. But but at least the boss here is somewhat entertaining. Like the name suggests, Labyrinth Zone is purgatory. With movement for the speed-based character being limited by the water, this level is a slog. Doesn't help that the water parts are also terrifying because of the very iconic drowning theme. I don't think I really like this level at all, and frankly, I just think it goes against everything Sonic as a game should go out to be. But the environment when you're out of the water is at least nice. The whole boss here is just doing more platforming in Labyrinth Zone, so it's just not any fun. Starlight Zone is okay. The environment kinda reminds me of what Stardust Speedway would go on to perfect, being the nighttime cityscape. The platforming here is okay, and everything about it is just okay. The mediocrity is astounding. But the mechanics of the seesaw coming into the boss fight is nice. I like the switch up in boss style for this one in particular. Oh my god, they're getting more forgettable as they go on. Scrap Brain is meant to be some sort of factory scene, if I were to guess. The environment fits it, and so do the obstacles, but it's just all very dreary. I just forgot this place existed before I went to go write the script. I like the part at the end of the second act where Eggman sends you into White Labyrinth Zone, though. There's no boss for this level, though, because the final zone takes up that role. The final zone is a fight with Eggman with no rings. This fight would be a cakewalk with rings, and without them, he's just slightly difficult. And the end. Now that that's over with, it's time to talk about the less obvious stuff, like the OST. The OST in this game is great. Even if they will only get better as the games go on, it's really good here and perfectly serviceable. I mean, the Green Hill Zone will never stop being iconic, and that is for good reason. But one last thing before I go on to the conclusion is that I brought someone on for today. A dear friend of mine, Thomas. He's a Sonic fan, and I'm not, so I felt his opinion on this game mattered somewhat. Take it away.
Sonic 1 definitely feels like the first game in its series. It definitely has a lot of the core basics here, like Chaos Emerald, Sonic's basic moveset, how badniks work, bosses, all the good stuff, as well as some of the worst zones. But it does have some things missing. Spin Dash in the original, although later versions do include it, amongst other things like Supersonic, Tails, Knuckles, and all of those other classics that show up in Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 Knuckles, but don't appear here. The game is pretty fun, but it does go back and forth between good and bad zones. Green Hill being really good, Marble being not so good, Springyard being pretty fine, etc, etc. I don't think zones like Labyrinth or Marble are as worse as people say once you get used to them, but they have a lot of beginner's traps that can make playing it the first time pretty difficult. While this wouldn't be my go-to Sonic game, it is a pretty enjoyable experience once you are decent at these games. If you do ever want to go back to it, I think it is a perfectly fine game. Although, it could be a bit difficult on your first time around. Although, I do think it is a must-play at some point. It is the first Sonic game, and I think it is still the core Sonic gameplay. Unlike some other games, like Sonic Spinball. It's still a pretty solid game. I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
As much as I had snide things to say about the game, I do really think that this is some of the best the Genesis had to offer. The gameplay is great and everything just works. Next time, whenever I decide to talk about Sonic 2, I'll probably talk about CD at the same time and compare the two, for fun, because that at least sounds like an interesting way to continue the series. I don't know. Anyways, until I see you again, stay fast. That was so cringy, oh my god.